Hi, this is Adam from MakerState, and right now I'm back with the second webinar for the Maker Fellows program. This is going to be about Scratch Basics Floppy Fish. So just some general notes before we get started, just based on my conversations with Roger and Steven and some of you in office hours and things like that. First of all, STEM Collab should be your home for learning how to deliver these challenges and for finding all of the resources that you need to deliver these makerspaces. So we've had some confusion. I've heard, just based on people's questions in office hours, there just seems to be some confusion about getting into STEM Collab. So one, if you're still having trouble getting into STEM Collab, please contact me immediately, and I'll help you sort that out, because we really want you to be getting into STEM Collab and using those resources to prepare for these challenges and interact with your other fellow teachers as well. Okay, so to get into STEM Collab, you're going to maker-state.org. You're logging in with the username that you created during training and the password STEMCollab123, all lowercase, one word. That is unless you've changed your password. So if you've changed your password in the STEM Collab, once you log in, you can change it to whatever you want. If you have done that, then that will be your password. Okay, so any issues about forgotten usernames or passwords not working, things like that, please reach out and we'll fix that right away. And then just as far as what you're doing in the STEM Collab, prepping for these lessons, completing a prototype, doing a quiz, commenting on a prep and practice prompt. And these are particularly important for us because we can't visit your makerspaces as much as we'd like, and sometimes if you're not coming to the office hours, this is a really easy way just to hear back some immediate feedback on what's working and what's not working in your makerspaces, and just see how you're progressing in your skills on these different Scratch projects and things like that. So we're really trying to get people to do these prep and practice prompts. So please, if you're in the collab, leave us some feedback. Thank you. On office hours, we've begun doing our office hours. They're happening on Mondays, usually from 12 to 12:30, and then again from 6 to 6:30. So drop on in. Sorry, from 6:30 to 7, 12 to 12:30 and 6:30 to 7 on Mondays. And we are trying to serve as many people as we can. So if you just know that Mondays never work for me and you really want to come to some of these office hours, also just drop us a note, let me know, say, hey, I really want to come to these office hours, but I'm always busy on Mondays. Can you schedule some more outside of Mondays? Or you and I can make our own time to just check in on some issues. Definitely want to just hear from people and know how they're progressing through some of this content and some of this makerspace delivery. So be in touch about that, and we will be in touch about that as well. Getting to school visits, Roger and I are starting to schedule some school visits, so I'll be later this week getting out to some of my first makerspaces of this year to see how these are starting up, and we'll be doing more so going forward. As you know, we have many different schools that we're serving, so I might not get to some of your schools for a couple weeks from now, but we are starting to make those visits. So expect some contact from us about scheduling those. And finally, you should all now have access to a new course in your STEM Collab called Scratch Skills. And those are quick. I try to shoot for under 5, but sometimes they get up more towards 7 or 8 minute videos, short videos just about specific Scratch skills, kind of not in the context of any particular project, but just how to use different blocks, how to use different parts of the interface. So check those out if you want specific brush-ups on a specific block or skill, or even feel free to show some of them in your classroom if you would like to, just to quickly demonstrate how to use a particular block. Especially in this challenge, there are a lot of new Scratch skills that you and your students are going to be getting into. So most of them, if not all of them, I think are already covered in some Scratch skills that I've uploaded, and I'll be uploading more of those in the coming weeks. So look out for that. Okay, Makerspace prep. I had this slide in my webinar last week, but just to touch back on it really quickly, this Makerspace weekly challenge checklist from Roger is a great way to just quickly make sure you're prepared to deliver your Makerspace on a given week. It's starting with prepping for your lesson in STEM Collab, building the webinar, building the prototype, doing the quiz, etc. Prepping your makerspace technology. So hopefully, if you did your first Scratch challenge in your makerspace, you had a smooth experience signing kids onto Scratch and getting into the Scratch interface for the first time. So hopefully you have a plan for how your computers and your Wi-Fi access and all that is working. Your supports, attendance, facilitating the makerspace. These are things we've all talked about, but again, this list is a really easy way just to make sure you have all your ducks in a row going into a makerspace. And specifically, some of these ideas down here are the things that we find are the first to kind of get forgotten or disregarded as the pressures of your time limits and things like that in the classroom start adding up. And we just want to remind you, really try to make sure you're getting your rubrics completed, you're sending your students home with these parent reports, and then you're using the design cycle poster with the magnets and giving out these badges. None of these things are particularly hard to do, but it's a lot of small things to remember and keep track of. So please try to be on top of these and give us your feedback on how these things are working, particularly around badging and the rubric use. If you find this, the badges are really working, but they don't understand what to do with the rubrics or something like that, please give us that feedback either by, commenting it below this webinar or commenting it in a prep and practice prompt or just in an office hour when we're talking or in an email. We definitely want to hear your feedback on these sorts of makerspace mechanics. Okay? So getting into Scratch, this is Scratch Basics number 2, Floppy Fish. Your materials are exactly the same from the last Scratch challenge. You have your computers with internet access. Optionally, you can use your Scratch blocks, your pre-printed Scratch blocks, and I think those work particularly well for this challenge, to be honest. So I would definitely bring along, a stack of your if-then blocks specifically. Find those really helpful for this challenge. Then your rubrics and your parent reports, of course. Rubrics handed out at the beginning of class, parent reports handed out at the end. And one thing about the rubrics, I've definitely heard the comment that it's hard to make sure there's a few minutes at the end of class to do these rubrics. And we actually recommend that you just try to fill them out, have your students try to fill them out, I should say, as they're going through the challenges. So in your lesson plan that we'll look at in a moment, you have those moments kind of highlighted or checked off where the rubric points come into play. So just try to hit those as you're going through the challenge, then you won't have to worry about it at the end of class. For some categories, it's a little more difficult than others to evaluate before the end of the makerspace, but for the ones that you can, try to evaluate them as you're moving through the challenge. Okay, so we have our discover phase, our circle meeting for this challenge, and there's a lot of new stuff in this challenge, I realize, as I went back and tried to pull all of it out. So this might be a slightly more involved circle meeting than usual, just because there's so many new things we're talking about. But our main idea here is how can we use if-then statements and XY coordinates to control the movement of sprites in Scratch. So depending on the age of your students, XY coordinates might be something they've never heard of before, or maybe something they have a little bit of experience with. But I find it's useful to relate XY coordinates to something like longitude and latitude, how we use that to describe the position of something on a map. Or maybe you can think of other examples that are similar to the use of X and Y coordinates. If your students are using graphs or using something else that could be related, bring in your own experience and your own knowledge to try to make that concept as relatable as possible. So this is a good opening question. How do we describe the position of something on a map? That's a good opening question to get your conversation started. And you can use that either as a group discussion or as a think, pair, share. And hopefully you can use that to lead yourself towards a place where you can talk about some of your keywords, including your X and Y coordinates. And so again, your X coordinate is just your position left or right of the center of the stage in this sense, and your Y coordinate is your position above or below, right? And we also have if-then statements and loops, which are new types of Scratch blocks. And if-then statements are a really important part of this challenge. And I think a good way to kind of introduce this challenge and introduce the idea of if-then statements is to just go to your prototype and maybe have a student, test it out or something like that, and see if you can have your students list out all of the different if-then statements that might be part of this challenge as before they go into it. Even without going into the code, we can say, okay, well, I see that if I press my space bar, my fish will go upward. If I press the right arrow, my ship will go to the right. If I touch one of these walls, I have to go back to the beginning. If I touch these cheesy puffs, then, whoops, I missed them. If I touch the cheesy puffs, then I can go to the next level. So these are all the sorts of things that you might be able to write down using an if-then statement. Okay? Getting back over here, we also have loops, and loops are just a repeating section of code. In this project, we're using loops to get ourselves that nice smooth movement. In the Great Race, we had very chunky, sort of pixelated step-by-step movement, but in this challenge, we can achieve that smooth movement by repeating our movements over and over very quickly using our loops. And the other new thing here in this challenge is using the paint tool to create backdrops in a little more of a sophisticated way than we used on the previous challenge. So again, you're going to create those backdrops by going to the paint tool right here. And maybe it's just worth a quick demonstration on how to do that, how to create a backdrop, and then later, once you're in the process, how to duplicate and edit some of your backdrops to quickly just build up more of them. Okay. Again, using the printed scratch box to define the different if-then statements, that's a really useful way to just break down this challenge into some easier to define parts. And you'll find, when we get to actually writing this script over here, this script largely just looks like a large list of if-then statements, right? If then else, if then, if then, if then, if then. So once you dissect your program into some if-then statements, it becomes really easy to kind of transition from, what may be called pseudocode or a paper prototype to your actual Scratch code. And that's one of the benefits of using this block programming language, where it's really easy just to read through your code. Let's set this backdrop back to what it was before. Whoops. Okay. So that is using those and then demonstrating the XY coordinates. So a really useful way to talk about XY coordinates and introduce them in Scratch is using this XY grid down here at the bottom of the stage. And using this XY grid, we can see the different locations on the stage, like so. And this is just a really easy way to show, okay, we have 0, 0 here in the center of our stage. We have positive 240 for our X coordinate here on the far right side, negative 240 for our X coordinate here on the left side. And if your students have just never seen X and Y coordinates before, bringing up this backdrop and even having them prototype this project or writing the scripts in front of this backdrop can be really useful. Whoops. Okay, so here, let's just take some of these extra things that I've done away. And in fact, I'm going to quickly save this as a copy, just so if I mess it up, I don't break my original. Okay, so now I just want to talk about some other hacks and ways that we can kind of take this project further. So right now this is working pretty well. We have our walls that send us back to the beginning. We have our scripts that advance to the next level if we're touching the cheesy puffs. And I think maybe the natural next thing to want to do to this game is find a way to end it, because the way it works right now is it'll just keep on cycling through ever. If these are our 4 backdrops, we'll go through all 4 of them, and then afterwards, there is no afterwards. This is just going to keep cycling back. I think in this case 2, 3, 1, 4, back to 2, etc. And what we want to do is find a way to actually end our game maybe after this 4th level, or after however many levels you want. So I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly. So let's just say that this will be my last level, level 4, and after you complete this level, you win the game. So first thing I'm going to do is just create a new backdrop and say, and maybe add some text to it, which will just say, you win. And maybe I'll make this really big, and maybe add a nice fill to it. Do a little gradient here with this blue and this white, like that. That looks nice. I'll do it again inside the O. Okay, cool. So there's our winning backdrop. And next thing we need to do is actually make this backdrop appear when, or rather stop the game when we reach this backdrop. Because right now, if we start this game using the green flag, we'll come back to this original backdrop. And I think what I really want to do is set this to, now that I'm looking at this, our first backdrop is actually called backdrop 2. So I'm just going to make that little change because we're actually starting on the second one. So pardon this bug here, but we want to change to backdrop 2 when we start. So now when I press this green flag, here we go. We start on this nice easy backdrop, and we'll swim through the levels, and eventually we'll get to backdrop number 4. And when we beat this backdrop, which hopefully I can do, all right, I might have to cheat. Let's just cheat so we don't sit here watching me try to beat this for a while. Whoops. This is actually pretty hard to do. Oh, I guess I can't cheat. So let me just beat this quickly, and we'll get to our final backdrop. And what we really want to do, there we go. Oh, I totally touched that. Come on. I will edit out probably some of this, me failing to beat this at a later time. Okay, well, eventually I will get to this Cheesy Puffs, and we will go to the You Win backdrop. And what we want to do when we hit the You Win backdrop is just stop everything. And the easiest way to do that is by using a block from events that's called When Backdrop Switches To. And with this, we can just write a really simple 2-block script that says when backdrop switches to backdrop number 5, stop all. And so in this case, once we get here, and I'm failing at demonstrating this, but once we actually get to these cheesy poofs and get to this backdrop, our whole game will just stop, which is exactly what we want. So here's this block in general, when backdrop switches to, really useful for making changes based on the backdrop. So, another thing we could do is change what sort of, what prize this is. So if we wanted to, we could add another costume to this. Let's say new costume from the library, and maybe on one level it's Cheesy Puffs, and on the next level it's going to be cake. Where's the cake? Right here. So I could have a script that says when backdrop switches to backdrop number 2, which was our first one, we switch costume to the Cheesy Puffs, and then when backdrop switches to, maybe the second to last one, or let's just do the second one right now for sake of showing this, we'll switch our costume to the cake. Okay, so let's try this out. We start at the beginning here. And there I got my Cheesy Puffs, and now here on my second backdrop, we've switched to the cake. And we could write a few more of these and have them switch back and forth, but those are 2 really quick hacks that you can do to improve this, just using the when backdrop switches to, and by creating maybe another new backdrop to end the game. Okay, so this is something you might want to give your students time to do after they do their play testing. And again, that play testing can happen either as a gallery walk, where you're having students go around and play test multiple projects, or just to think, pair, share. But after you do that, you definitely want to give them some time to iterate on their projects and actually make some of those improvements. Okay? So wrapping up, you want to make sure your students are getting time to assess themselves using the rubrics. And again, doing that during class, as they step through the challenge is perfectly fine. You want to leave some time for a circle debrief / badge ceremony of some sort, and give out your students badges for completing the challenge. And then finally send them off with those parent reports. Okay? And then afterwards, come back to STEM Collab, maybe share some feedback in that prep and practice prompt if you had some students create some really awesome projects, and then start prepping for Apple Catcher. And I'm just going to add another note to this and say that this challenge has a lot of stuff in it, and it's totally okay if you need an extra week to complete this. Maybe you only find your way through the first half of the challenge in your makerspace, and I'd rather you take the time to hit all of these steps fully and get all this stuff done for the challenge than try to rush through it and have your students rush to complete the build. So even if they finish the create phase in your first hour and a half or hour long makerspace, maybe the second makerspace will just be the play test and an improved session, which is totally okay. So be flexible with that, and we'll be flexible with that as well. And let us know how it goes, either in the office hours or by commenting on this video or somewhere else. So thank you for watching. Hope to see you in office hours or to see you in your makerspaces. And we'll be back on for office hours in just about half an hour. So stick around if you're watching right now for that. And I'll talk to you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.